To me, it's a simple question. I, to me, it's an obvious question. And so I ask, what's your user ID? I don't know. And what's your password? I don't know. What's your PIN number? I don't know. I ask these questions to get access to some account or some link or try to solve some tech problem. And she looks at me as if I've asked her for the launch codes for the nuclear missiles. Why don't you know it? Well, I don't ever use it. Well, what's the password? I can't remember it. They made me change my standard one and made me use a bunch of numbers, and I didn't write it down. And that's our basic conversation. That's what happens at our house anytime I try to help with an account that has failed, anytime I have to try to reset a password, anytime I have to try to solve some tech problem, or what should end up being a minor adjustment on the interweb thingy. I get met with this stone wall of I don't know my password, I don't know my PIN number, I don't know my user code, I don't know my access code, I don't know the secret handshake. Now, she has a few standard things that she likes to use, and they're typically words. She doesn't do well with numbers, and so she'll have a word or two that she likes to use. And if for some reason they make her change that, or if they make her do something with numbers or symbols, or if they won't let her reuse a password, then that account, that access point, that customer service link, that thing is now as elusive as Bigfoot, and it will never be seen or heard from again. So here we were on the couch the other night, and we're doing a little, and it really wasn't the other night, it was a couple of months ago, we were doing a little Cyber Santa thing, and we had access to this site that we're members of, and we're looking for Christmas presents for the minions, and I find this thing, and it's the thing. I mean, we're going to buy this thing, and we decide, hey, this is what we're going to get. And so I say, hey, this is it. And I hit, purchase, and then it looks for the purchasing information. And I lay the laptop down, and I get up and start walking toward the kitchen so I can retrieve my wallet, so I can get my credit card number. And she rattles it off. I mean, on the top of her head, like a homeschool kid from Mean Girls at the spelling bee, Xenocarp. Xenocarp, Xenocarp. But instead of it being Xenocarp, it's with numbers. It's 16 numbers. Who memorizes a 16-digit credit card number? Not only is this shocking if this were a normal person, but you've got to understand something about my wife. She's an extremely intelligent and very accomplished lady. She graduated with some kind of laud, magna or summa cum from college. She has a middle school and a high school endorsement to teach science, pre-engineering, biology, and she holds an advanced degree in kinesiology. But she has a tablespoon of dyslexia or dyscalculia. That means she doesn't do very well with numbers and the way that they're arranged. In our early marriage, balancing a checkbook might have well been like trying to balance a marble on an egg. Her propensity to transpose numbers was a constant worry. Now, you may say, well, why is that such a big deal? Well, if you're living on a youth minister's salary, the difference in 169 and 961 is a huge difference in the old bank account. And so you got to make adjustments for that. And before there was caller ID, before we had these magic things called cell phones and all this kind of stuff, just think about walking into a blinking machine and she said, oh, hey, some guy called and left you a message and I wrote down his number. Please, honey, don't write down the numbers. Let me listen to the numbers that are on the message machine. But, we would get, 20 or 30 calls if we'd been out of town or something. And so she would try to help me out and write down the numbers. And I dialed the number that she wrote down and not the actual number, but the number she wrote down. And then you get, the Chinese embassy or Frank's Plumbing Company. It's not the guy that called you looking for a youth speaker. Phone numbers have 10 digits. In the old days, our ancestors only used 7 of those digits if it wasn't a long distance phone call. Now, some of you won't even know what that even means. Yet here I am. I'm sitting on my couch beside my wife who doesn't do numbers, and I'm in utter amazement as the poster child for transposed numbers rattles off a 16-digit credit card number. Now, obviously, I blame Acme for this. Now, you think that I was going to say I blamed Amazon for this, and I do. But as I've stated before, it started with Acme. Yeah, the Warner Brothers cartoon about a coyote who's sitting in some isolated spot in the desert, and he can have a giant magnet, a rocket sled, or iron bird seed pellets shipped to his cave. Now, somebody watched those cartoons just like I did, but somebody decided, that would be cool to be able to order random needless stuff and have it just show up at your house. And this idea cooked in their brain, and they sat patiently holding on to this fantasy. And when the internet showed up, you know what happened? Voila, we have Amazon. Now, am I the only person who sees the connection between this? Acme, Amazon. Coincidence? I think not. So, how does a lady who is not proficient with numbers end up memorizing a 16-digit credit card number? Well, it's as simple as frequency and familiarity. That which is familiar becomes comfortable. That which becomes comfortable gets repeated, and that which gets repeated gets ingrained. Now, if we're talking about adaptive or even maladaptive behavior, it works the same way. That which gets repeated gets ingrained. If it works, and works can be in quotes, because if it's adaptive behavior, it really does work. If it's maladaptive behavior, it has the pseudo idea that it works, but that which works gets repeated, and that which gets repeated gets ingrained. The perceived reward or benefit reinforces the repetition, and the repetition creates habitual, ingrained behavior. That's basically the way video gaming works. That's the way social media type stuff works, because you have this compulsion loop. They give you just enough reinforcement. They give you just enough free playtime. They give you just enough rewards. You get just enough likes. The stuff you put on Facebook, it runs through an algorithm so that Facebook will send you people who like it and agree with you. You don't get a lot of dislikes or disagreement unless you're just on Facebook looking for drama. And so that perceived reward, that perceived benefit is going to get repeated, and the neuroplasticity of your brain and the myelin sheathing allows us to learn. It allows us to unlearn, and it allows us to relearn behavior. Now, it's also true that if you have something and you don't use it, you will lose it. In the same way that using it ingrains it, oftentimes not using it eliminates it or causes it to go extinct. You think about the phone numbers you used to know. Think about the phone numbers, if you're over, say, 40, think about the phone numbers that you used to have memorized that you could just pick up a phone and dial before cell phones eliminated the need for us to remember them. I have trouble telling you more than 3 or 4 people's phone numbers because in my contact list, they're listed by some kind of designator. Now, the voice control on my truck, it doesn't like for me to say Jackie. Number one, it doesn't know how we spell Jackie. Jackie spelled Jacque. So when I try to add it into my phone, it wants me to pronounce it as Jacques or Jacques or something like that. And I know a lot of people named Jack. And so in my phone contact list, I'll be driving along and need to call my wife, and I'll hit the thing and say, call the smoking hot wife. And it dials Jackie's number. Then I don't have to argue with my truck about who I meant. But even though I can tell it who to call, I don't have to remember those numbers. And since I don't remember those numbers, I probably couldn't tell you a dozen phone numbers from memory. It's interesting that this repetition thing, you can take a child who can't read. You take a child who really can't even tell you the letters of the alphabet, and you can repeat a jingle. We do this thing at church where we teach the children to repeat the books of the Bible. And you just take something as simple as the 27 books of the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Acts and letter to the Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, and Ephesians. And you sing that often enough with a little child, and a child that can't read, a child that really couldn't recognize them if they saw them on the screen, a child that has really no idea what the words even mean, can not only repeat them and pronounce them, they can do it better than most adults. And even without the ability to conceptualize anything about actual phonetics, they've mastered this list of some pretty complicated names. You see, practicing repeating behaviors without conceptualization is sort of a double-edged sword. I think, first of all, it shows the amazing qualities of the human brain, that you repeat something enough and you can memorize it even if you don't conceptualize it, and that's not always bad. There's some things that you need to learn to do, and you don't really know why you do them, but you do them. But sometimes we just learn to do things, and we just learn to do them, and without conceptualization, they're no good. It's a double-edged sword. The popular wax on, wax off method, in the Karate Kid movie was very entertaining, but that movement, that martial movement without context, would have probably been an epic failure. Personal observation is kata-based martial arts are about repetitive movement. And in a stylized exhibition or in stylized combat, I mean, those guys move fast and it's truly amazing. But you change one thing in that pattern, you change one thing in the opponent's response or prescribed response or scripted response, and the flow is interrupted and disaster ensues. I like to watch the Dumb Ways to Die videos on Facebook. And typically the soundtrack of the little song "Dumb Ways to Die" always shows some guy in a self-defense scenario where the bad guy has to be told how to attack in order for the technique to work. No, you're not supposed to attack that way, because if you attack that way, this memorized, stylistic, repetitive movement won't work. Well, that's one of the edges of the sword of repetitive movement and doing things repetitiously without conceptualization. The other edge of that sword is that if I do something enough, even if it's counterintuitive, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's not a strength area, even if it's not a natural response, and really even if I can't conceptualize it, even if it's foreign, if it gets repeated enough, it can become ingrained, and then it can feel natural. It can become natural. It can become organic and usable in spite of my inherent difficulties at the beginning. The old get comfortable being uncomfortable philosophy. Being out of breath helps you deal with being out of breath. And the more you push yourself to be out of breath, the better your aerobic and anaerobic conditioning will be. But until you repeat it enough till it becomes able to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, it doesn't have a lot of benefit. And let's walk away from martial arts, and let's walk away from exercise. Let's just talk about kindness and patience and gentleness and being polite and respectful and honest and caring and selfless and empathetic. Repeating these behaviors takes something that may be a deficit. It may be something that is unnatural. It may even be something that at first feels unpleasant to us, and turns them into something that we can do and we can use, and we don't even have to think about it. You can be unkind and impatient and harsh and rude and disrespectful and dishonest and uncaring and selfish, and those behaviors don't require any thought. They don't require any thought. They don't require any training, because those behaviors are easy. And that which is easy gets repeated. And so it takes intention. It takes us deciding to memorize, quote unquote, a different kind of behavior. It takes us deciding to memorize a different response. It's intentional, and it's a choice, because being pleasant or being unpleasant really is not just something that you do naturally. It's something that you choose to learn to do. Once we decide to repeat those sequences of kindness and goodness and gentleness and politeness and selflessness, once we repeat those sequences, and especially those sequences that are hard for us to learn in the first place, the only way to learn them is to practice them. And the only way to practice them, just like a credit card number, is to repeat them.